I think it's pretty fucking iconic that I am able to do those things without having to hide any of them, and also to help people bridge what's iconic for them in their life. What 2, 3, 10 things would you like to experience in your life?
Hello and welcome to Fuck Yeah, the podcast where we say fuck yeah to being unapologetically iconic. I am one of your hosts, Sarah Tom Chesson, and I am joined by I'm joined right now by a black screen because Robin's camera just died, but Robin is there with us.
I'm actually just so goth now that it's a completely black screen. So I've reached my iconic goth period.
Robin, how are you?
I'm good. I have so much going on, but I'm like overall, like everything is going towards the better, and I can feel that like in a life trajectory. So this conversation is actually incredibly timely and appropriate, I think, because I am starting to feel iconic, and I think like this kind of helps me solidify some of those concepts.
Yeah. What's giving you a fuck yeah right now?
Sarah.
Yeah.
Sarah. You can't see my face right now, but Sarah. How do I say this? I am, for the first time in 14 years, not in relationship. I am, I guess you could say, quote unquote, single. I'm not legally single. But I'm like arranging in my mind this idea of just, I guess, a new way, a new life path, that I was not expecting necessarily, that has emerged after years, about 4 years of relationship, deep diving, introspection, tenacity, not giving up. And I don't feel that I've given up, but I do feel like after 14 years, which is crazy. It was 2009 when I got into this relationship. Like my jeans were so skinny in 2009, just to give you a mental picture of how long ago this was. Yeah, it's coming to an end. And I think I haven't talked about it much on the podcast because it's incredibly personal. I'm totally, of course, okay with talking about the personal, but it was more, I guess, incredibly private, what we were going through. And I did not at any point know where it was going to go. But we have finally, after a tremendous amount of time and effort, had to split. And I'm doing a lot of grieving over that, but also a lot of imagining my life and being kind of free from the restrictions of what my partner wants me to be versus who I am and who I want to be. And
who you've become,
who I've become, who I am now, and who I'm becoming, So it's all very difficult and very good work that, can be painful and incredibly joyous. And I just have that kind of feeling, a little bit like being in my 20s or, late teens, of your life is just starting and you have so many possibilities, So it's very invigorating on that level. I'm very curious. I'm excited. And, at the same time, I'm sad and I'm grieving the loss of what we had, but also what we had was perfect when we got together, and what we have now is not right for either of us. anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's natural and normal and okay. And, we're trying to be as loving about it as possible. We are still family. We still have kids, and I want to be right with that relationship and strong in that relationship. And so we are working on that now, which is, I think, difficult and noble. It's not easy. So it's just, but it's crazy. It feels so different, even though nothing's actually totally changed. I mean, everything's changed, but nothing. I don't know. It's hard. I don't know.
Yeah, the very first thing you said was like single but not single, and it's interesting, and I'm sure people who don't have kids also have this experience of like, as you get older or you've been in a relationship for a longer time, like there's just all of these layers in which you are integrated with your partner. And like relationships can create this amazing container, right? Like it's like, oh, here is this space where we exist together as a unit. Hopefully, there's space within that container to also be your individual persons. But the container can also become like a confinement chamber.
Right. Yep.
That like defines you in a way that you realize that you've evolved outside of. And so you hope that the container can grow and shape shift with you, but sometimes you have to break out of the container.
Yeah.
And it's like I had that experience as well of not feeling single for a long time. Like there was a liberating factor, but then it took me a really long time to feel like, oh, now I'm single.
Right. And it's like the mind shift. It's like for 14 years,
Yeah.
it hasn't been on my mind that I'm single or able to make a lot of decisions, even outside of sexual relationships, on my own, and we really built a life together. And I think that part of why it's taken so long for the disconnect. I mean, we've both talked about how if we didn't have kids, if we didn't have a property together, we would have flipped the table a long time ago, and we would have learned so much less about each other and ourselves.
Well, that is sort of the beauty. Like, I actually do think that sometimes that integration forces you to be really considerate.
Yeah.
In the choices that you make, and that there is growth that happens in that space, even if the outcome is essentially the same as what your younger self would have done, or your less like entangled selves would have done. The process to get there is really valuable. And I will say you did it with a lot more thoughtfulness. And I kind of flipped a table. Like, I mean, we talked about that one in the Rena episode. Like, I felt like I exploded a bomb in my life, and you have not done that. And I think that there's a lot of value.
Right. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And it also makes me feel very clear. And oh my God, Sarah, here's another fuck yeah, and I don't want to totally derail all this. I've been trying to figure out who I'm attracted to, because I have been so skewed by my childhood pain around men that I've been obsessed with getting love from them. But I have attraction to so many kinds of people. I mean, basically all of them. But also, as I've been gaining weight, getting to my, I think, more natural weight, my not hyper controlled, like I'm going to starve myself for other people's satisfaction weight. Sarah, and also as I've increased my masculinity, the way that I find pleasurable, I look at myself in the mirror, naked or otherwise sometimes, and I'm sexually attracted to myself. Okay, Sarah, it's so fucking weird. It's not just that I look in the mirror and I'm like, hey, hot stuff. It's that I'm like, oh, damn. Oh, wait, what? And it's revealing what I am, I think, more truly attracted to. And I think that I do embody on a certain level what I'm attracted to. But it is fucking weird. And it sounds, I think, like the way that we're raised in the culture that we're raised in, it sounds conceited, which I think is what I appreciated so much about, talking to Jasmine and being able to boldly say iconic and relate to yourself in an iconic way, is that I do find myself sexually attractive. I would fuck me. I would be top on my fucking list. Okay.
Leo of you. I'm gonna be sending you all the Leo memes from here on out.
Oh yeah. It's like the most Leo thing, right?
Of all of them, but it is pretty great. So we have jet setting Jasmine on the podcast today, and we're thinking like this is going to really be a conversation about porn and ethical pornography, and then she just like right out the gate talks about what iconic status means, and I think we are both sort of lit on fire around that. So we're going to go in a lot of different directions in this conversation, but where we start is really about, what does it mean to be in your iconic era? What does it mean to be an icon? And Jet Setting Jasmine, if you are not familiar with her work, she is an adult film performer, director. She's a master fetish trainer. She and her partner, King Noir, co-own a production company called Royal Fetish Films. It's a multi-channel adult entertainment business. And my Lord, they create some really smoking hot content, let me tell you. She is also a licensed therapist and does on-set support work for performers. And so she is really got her hands in a lot of different facets of the industry. She and King Noir do a lot of work around decolonization of porn and just kind of how we're thinking about sex and sexuality. So she's just like
and she's an incredible parent. Like the parenting advice was blowing me away.
Yeah, the work that she does around sex positive parenting has been really inspiring to me. She's one of the facilitators of the Everyone Deserves Sex Ed certification trainings. She's amazing. And I'm really excited to get into conversation with her.
She blew me away. And what a great conversation. What an incredible, iconic person.
Yes, seriously. Let's bring her on.
Jasmine, welcome. We're so excited for this conversation today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Well, we like to start you off with a few warm-up questions. Who was your first celebrity crush?
Probably the first like obsessive was Usher.
Ooh.
And
yes,
it wasn't one of those like girly, like, oh my gosh, it was like a full on, like, I'm in a relationship with Usher.
Yes.
I cannot believe that he's doing these things out here.
Yeah.
So for like 15 years, I was like being cheated on by Usher publicly.
How dare he?
How dare he, right? And hopefully he knows of our work and all of that, like, fangirl energy has since passed. But that was like a real serious crush where I would like go into this full role play about this secret relationship that I had with Usher. So, hey, it's out now. It never existed. It still doesn't.
But it's like 15 years. That's a long time to be crushing on someone or to be in a relationship with someone.
That doesn't, a fantasy role play. But it does tell you the power of role play and fantasy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So even seeing him perform on the stage now, it was like this little fantasy still gets to, and they've gotten so involved as I've gotten pretty involved in my own fantasies.
Yeah.
Like as I matured, so did the crush. Yeah, that's funny. And we're probably around the same age. So it's not like one of those like, oh, I've always looked up to, or I've always wanted to be. No, it was my peer. I've always been like, no, that's right. That man I can have.
Yeah. Mutuals. Grow old together, mature together. I love that.
Exactly.
What was your first mode of masturbation?
Furniture. I can remember the couch. It was like a little like black and gray, that really terrible 80s durable, itchy but firm material. That was our, it was our family couch. And I remember sitting on the arm rest of the couch and having that first moment of like, oh, wait a minute. If I sit like this, I can feel that. Okay. Okay. And nobody knows what's happening right now.
Or at
Like,
least I think nobody knows.
nobody knows what's happening right now. Okay, this is like my own personal secret that's happening within myself. Like, I discovered a feeling that no one else taught me. On this inanimate object that's not hurting anyone else, right? I'm allowed on the couch, probably not on the armrest, but I was allowed on the couch. I'm allowed on the couch, and it doesn't bother anyone. Because as the youngest in my house, and my sisters were a lot older than me, everything was like, oh, why are you doing that? Don't do that. Sit down, be quiet. So I can sit here quietly, rub to the left and the right, have this positive feeling, and be left alone and leave everyone else alone. So yeah, that was probably at around age maybe 6, somewhere between 4 and 6. And I can remember. So it really just, that's why like toys came really natural to me. It's like, oh yeah, these objects with the right amount of pressure and the right amount of leave me alone can provide me a certain, this secret moment with myself, this special intimate moment with myself.
Yeah, it's like a magical kind of autonomy. It's like because it's just for you, and not much is just for you when you're a little kid.
No. Honestly, even as an adult, right?
Right.
Not a lot is just for you. You're set up to believe that.
Right.
But a lot is constantly being either regulated, right? Or surveilled, even to a certain extent. And or there's just a lot of needs, even if those needs are to sustain you in your day-to-day life. It's a lot. It takes a lot just to eat, sleep, and shit every day.
Right?
It takes a lot.
Yeah, just taking care of this body is a lot.
Oh my gosh, let alone also, and include some pleasure and some, personal intimacy there is, just from the time that we're little people and being pushed and prodded and pushed in directions and certain expectations, and being forced to learn certain things when someone else wants you to learn some certain things. And then fast forwarding, realizing adult is not that much more autonomous.
That's right.
Like, you just have a different parental figure, if you will.
Yes.
Oof. No, and that was really mixed into your story about how your place in the family and how just trying not to be in the way or intruding or annoying anyone, and then you get to have this special moment that is like magical and secret. Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and it doesn't, like you said, that in the autonomy, I love that explanation. It's like, I am in charge of what's happening, because at that time you're not in charge of what you eat.
Yeah, nothing.
What you wear, and nothing. So just like, and then I as it progressed, I learned like squeezing my legs really tight. So if there isn't an object that I could use, if I could squeeze my legs really, 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 really tight, then maybe I could make that feeling, that friction. So yeah, beautiful thing. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. I feel like this is going to really lead into our conversation, but I also want to know if you have any fuck yeahs right now.
Ooh, well, fuck yeah to magical moments by yourself.
Yeah.
To more of those, and really, I don't know, just like fuck yeah to this moment. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, that's sweet. Yeah, more magical moments on our own. It's really undervalued in society. It's almost like if you don't experience it or someone doesn't witness it, it doesn't count.
Even more so now, right? Like if you don't post it, if you don't share it, it didn't happen. Yes, so that no need for external validation for pleasure.
Yeah. They're starting today off right, I feel like.
Yes. In your intro, it is very clear like what a multi-hyphenate you are. Performer, a director, you own your own adult entertainment business, you're a psychotherapist, you do client work, you work on sets, and you are a parent.
I am.
So talk about the magic of some, alone time.
Mm.
How do all of these things intersect and
Mhm.
inform each other in your life?
So I was in a conversation like, what creates an icon? Do I think that
Mm.
the things that both King Noir and I are doing in our work is iconic status, which led to somewhat, not really a debate, just a healthy conversation about I don't feel like I have been the first to do a lot of those things on that list.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I am the first person to do those things together at the
Mm,
same time,
mhm,
openly and
mhm,
unapologetically,
Mm.
and in a way that people can see the connecting points, right? And so to me, that is iconic, right? That I can share all of these intersections, knowing the consequences that may be to share those intersections, but it being so fucking important to me that
Mm.
those intersections can breathe, that they can live, that they have
mm,
a lane of their own. It's so important that I am willing to do it openly and at the same time, and dare to have everything. So that being said, they all inform each other because they're all very daring
Mm-hmm.
whenever you put the two together. And it's not because they're daring because I think they are. I think they're pretty normal. I'm like, yeah,
yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
and like, absolutely, I want to care for my family, provide for my family in a way that doesn't cause me to have to exploit myself in a particular way, because we're all exploiting ourselves in some way, shape, form, fashion. I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
seem so far removed and tone deaf to think that I am not in an exploitative industry, both therapy and porn. Let's be
Mm-hmm.
clear.
Mm,
It is incredibly daring to be a therapist that pushes back on the system that
Yeah.
I also support, and I'm cared for by it.
yeah.
I am incredibly critical that the industry that I am in is steeped in white supremacy, in
Mm-hmm.
misogyny, in homophobia, and transphobia.
Mm-hmm.
And as we are talking out of one side of our mouth about making mental health so much more accessible and et cetera, we are also at the same time feeding insurance companies that don't
Mm-hmm.
support and feeding policies that don't support and not rewriting our tools that we all use that are steeped in those supremacies. So it is very daring to have this cushiony job, as some folks would say,
Mm,
criticize it every day, even just by the way I show up,
Mm-hmm.
that I could expose my body and my sex and my sexuality and things about me. Just I could disclose on like publicly things about me, and I could also still show up at 9 o'clock in the morning for a session
Mm-hmm.
and shut myself down to hold space for my client and to take all of the tools that I learned in school, just like any other therapist, and not have my masturbation have an influence on that. Like I can do that. I can
Yeah.
compartmentalize the same way everyone does when they do whatever they want to do on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and they're allowed to show up to their job on Monday. Or how you can be a barista and you can also be a nurse, and that's sort of looked at as like, wow, that's honorable, two jobs to care for your family.
Mm-hmm.
When I've also taken two seemingly different professions and managed to make them work. So yeah, like I mean, all of that to say those intersections they inform each other because they're all bold. They are all my full personhood. So there's no way they don't inform each other. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's no way that, although I can compartmentalize the way that I behave with my clients, right, and what services are offered at what different times, if my client is sharing with me the experience of being a kinky person in BDSM, and they are a queer person of color, there's no way that I don't understand that. I do actually need to lean in a little bit more with this client. I
Mm-hmm.
need to be a little bit more patient with how and if they share and why they share, because all of those intersections inform how someone shows up in therapy. And that's the same compassion and the same patience that I lean
Mm-hmm.
into when somebody of that exact same description shows up for a kink session.
Mm-hmm.
I need to slow down just a little bit more with this client. I need to really explain what technique is being used and how it's being used and how it might be beneficial or not beneficial, because this client is coming into this space with a lot of intersections that I'm very familiar with.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how it informs both aspects of my work. And then the parenting piece, same stuff. I want these kids to grow up with good mental health hygiene.
Mhm.
Good mental health hygiene means that you bring all the shit that needs cleaning and shaking and addressing, and it's hygiene. We're not just coming in chaos or in crisis. So showing them like how I do, modeling the type of services that I provide, that I believe that mental health is not a privilege. I believe it is very, very much a part of our overall wellness, just as much as our sexual wellness is. So same thing as a parent, like providing this comprehensive person with that is full of resources to them, compartmentalizing what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate based on their age, their personality, the laws. I do factor those things into, right, practical approach. However, my intersections are going to inform how they're raised. They're going to inform how they show up for other people, or how they present themselves. So every single aspect that you read in my bio, I think it's pretty fucking iconic that I am able to do those things without having to hide any of them, and also to help people bridge what's iconic for them in their life. What 2, 3, 10 things would you like to experience in your life that maybe you thought, if I take this road, there's no possible way I could explore those routes. And I exist so that people could, I exist for me, period, first. Second, if it's a model that allows you to see, I can actually explore those roads at the same time, or whenever I'm ready, or because I fucking want to, then like, I'm here for it. I'm here for your iconic moment.
Everything you're talking about is so iconic. I love that you're using that word, just using that word. I think, especially like as a woman, as a person of color, that is so bold and iconic, because we're so taught not to do that. You're pushing towards just like this bold authenticity that is so helpful to others because you're being yourself. And that's what is so raises people up to this, like, oh, I can live this life that is so meaningful and I can be proud of that.
Right.
And I think that's like the icon part of it. I love that you're using that word. And so it feels like so powerful, and it comes across just like the photos on your website and the way you're speaking on the website. It's very inspiring and powerful. And we've talked a lot about how sex workers can be healers in this way that we don't experience in other parts of our culture. And so I love all of these like ways that you're weaving this together in the most like authentic way. And I'm feeling like a little bit like I'm leading towards like an iconic moment in my life, and I haven't had that word, but I'm gonna snatch it or share it rather. Yeah,
It's there.
thank you.
It's been there. It's been there. It's
Yeah,
us,
it's
and we
always
get to
been there.
redefine, right? It's always been there. We get to sort of like, okay, does this meet this definition? Am I understanding of this definition?
Yeah.
And again, it's sort of everything contextually. Like our confidence is in context, right? So if someone is feeling good about whatever it is that they're doing, it may not be a meaningful milestone or thing that I value to explore, but incredibly meaningful for them. So for me, it's how I define myself, what I think is important. Some people may say like, that's crazy, or you don't have to do all of those things. You could just take your good therapy job, right, and make good money, right, and like live a nice, easy life. But that's not meaningful to me. And I think being able to live a life that is meaningful to you, including all of the consequences and benefits that come, is what makes it worth it for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, as you're talking, you came onto my radar, I think 8 or 9 years ago, because every performer that I know has wanted to work with you in King Noir. Like, I
I
was
hope in
like,
the 8 or 9 years they have by now.
I'm like, wait, who? I need to like know who these folks are, and so then started looking into work, and I was like, oh yes, 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 I see. Like, there's such power that comes through, and you're so self-actualized. And as you're talking, it's like making. I mean, I had this question for you already, but it's putting the pieces together for me of like why I want to ask you about your parent life, because I think that I have a little bit of some breaks in my whole personhood, in that like I often feel like I can't bring my work into spaces where my kid is. Like I'm already stepping into the space as a queer person. I'm divorced. Like I'm really different than a lot of my kids' friends' parents. And I'm hyper aware of that all the time. And so then when people ask me, what do you do? I do gymnastics. I mean, sometimes I'm just like, I do sex ed. I do marketing for sex toy companies. I work in the pleasure industry. But most of the time I'm kind of doing some weird gymnastics around.
Trying to
Like,
figure out what they do to figure out where the safe landing is.
yeah, like not answering the question. So I am just so curious about how you navigate, those spaces where you're not with people who are still so steeped in all of the shame that we have around sex and sexuality and pleasure and kink and all of these things.
This is part of being bold and iconic, is that you could listen to your intuition. Okay, that is something that has been taken away from any powerful being, is the ability to trust gut, right? So that those instincts that are just like, I like hang out with cool people for work, like you're trying to protect your family.
Yeah.
And I think that there is this tends to be a fight, right? With like, existing is not safe here. It doesn't mean I think I'm wrong. It doesn't mean I am ashamed. It does not mean that, just so y'all know, I'm reporting from Florida. Okay.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So having this conversation, we couldn't do like an open podcast out at the beach, so to speak. Like we
Right.
couldn't have this conversation safely without feeling like, if we don't watch our words carefully, if we're not careful about our audience, this could be dangerous. I mean, and this comes from my social work training. Safety first, always, always safety first. Like all of this bad bitch shit, you could say for the internet, if so be it, or till your kids are in a place that they could defend themselves, or you're in a position where if people act poorly, you can remove your children from that space, that experience. Most of us cannot up and move and change our community. Right? Most of us cannot say to our children, those people are sex negative, so I don't want you playing with their kids, because their sex positive or negativity really has no place with our children playing with each other. So how much is me being me? Does it need to override my children's safety? And honestly, it's never the case. It always needs to be a very strategic and calculated way. I think what we could do is better prepare ourselves for that, so we can feel like, this is a part of my identity. I'm not hiding from my identity, but I do not openly share the inner workings of aspects of my career, because it's not safe, right? Again, affirming to ourselves, that's the only person we're willing to, is that it's not because of shame. It's because of other people's shame. And I am not in control of regulating that. And until I am, I'm going to protect myself and my family. So I, there's a kind of a two-step approach that we did. One was preparing the children the best that we could for at their age level for what they needed to know in case they were asked questions. They knew what we felt was important for them to know. At each age, we gave them more information. So that way it wasn't okay, you caught me. I did this mental gymnastics, but now you're going to do my kid in that way. Like, no, they're also prepared. Also, again, this is that modeling piece of where I'm not ashamed of what I do. It does need to go into a compartment at times. And I'm modeling to you as you get older. So my 24-year-old daughter now, like, totally gets, she's like, oh yeah, I get the bite sizes. I understand why you did it that way. None of this, it never became difficult for her to be in this, because she never was like just learning with the public. She was always, she just had a little bit more information each year, or each, honestly, related to her own personal milestones. It wasn't like each year.
Right.
So that was one. And then the second approach is being prepared. So, and this is without lying, I am a therapist. and my partner is a musician. That's the first answer that you're going to receive.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple. Because yes, you do need to vet and judge who you're having in and out of your experience, because it just unfortunately is not, we're just not in a position where you could just rattle it off. But think about other professions that do that too. Do folks just go like Navy SEALs, CIA operative, drug dealer, right? There's these like, there are these professions, whether they are legal or illegal, even bud tender, right? That's legal now.
Right.
If you in the cannabis industry, but there's some really contrasting thoughts. If you are a nurse, but you happen to work in an abortion clinic, are you still a nurse? Are you still a good nurse, right?
Yeah.
So kind of take a moment and sort of think about how stigma permeates what specifically women, especially what type of work that is acceptable or unacceptable for women. How that stigma is there across the board already. So now you don't feel so alone. Like, I mean, judging by the three of us, like I probably like, oh God, like that's the biggest whore of the three of them. So y'all are doing okay if the three of us were in company. But you probably are the spiciest person on in your car line. So, knowing your audience.
Yeah.
Here in the town that we live in, like my children need to be the stars in this town. Okay. I am a star if I am in a strip club, in a dungeon, on a podcast that's appropriate. But in their life, I choose to play small with respect to like community. And the community that we build is around the children, not around my personal identity. And those relationships have developed over time, just like any other friendship should develop. Comfortable with your boundaries, comfortable with what you are okay with disclosing and not disclosing, and having a central focus of what that relationship is about, and allowing it to develop over time. And over time, I've had like my kids' friends from when they were younger are like lifelong friends now, but I allowed it to develop. I did not start with the shock value. I did not center myself in those relationships. And a lot of times once they have realized like, wait a minute, like you're always traveling, your kids are so lovely, everything is so wonderful, like tell me more. Okay, you understand the full person and my values. Now you're ready for more information.
Yeah. It's interesting because you're applying the same method that you do with your kids. Like, when is the appropriate time for this additional information? And it's also allowing people to know you before placing a stigma on top of you. And that is actually what will help them relieve themselves of that stigma that they're harming themselves and others with around sexuality and things like that, because they're like, oh, here's a person who's actually doing all of it in this, ethical, healthy way. That's really that's
Absolutely. Yeah, safety first, but safety first.
Yeah. I mean, that leads me into my next question, which is about talking to kids about porn. You've already kind of laid the groundwork for how, like, sort of macro level, how you approach conversations with kids. But I feel like, I mean, my kid is obsessed with YouTube, like, wants to be, like, would rather be on YouTube than, doing anything else. And I'm like, I'm so confused. I don't get it. Like, I try to participate with them and I'm like, this is so weird.
Boring.
Yeah, but it's like it's a space where we're already starting to have conversations about online safety because it's getting introduced to kids so much younger than certainly, I mean, it wasn't around when we were that age, right? So I'm curious about how you have that staged conversation with kids about porn safety, consuming porn ethically, all of those kinds of conversations. Like, how have you done it with your kids?
So each kid is totally different. So that's number one. And they're not me. That was another hard. I'm like, why are you not absorbing this information like I would? Oh, because you're not me, right? So just even taking that equation out, like, okay, good. If I approach her like this, because this is how I would want to be talked to, just like trying to think like, how does your kid receive any information? How do they learn about anything? You know enough to know if you talk in this tone and you say it 1,000 times, nothing is going to happen. But if you get down and lean in and you say, hey, in 10 minutes, we're going to sit at the table and we're going to talk about something serious. Like you get a different reaction. They know like, oh, this is serious. I think when we take the pressure off of it has to be one conversation or like it is going to be that type of sit down. If we take the pressure off and go like, I have like a long time to be having multiple conversations. Like this isn't a one and done. I mean, we do it all the time. Like wash your face, brush your teeth, da da da. Like we do it all the time, having the same conversation until they actually get it. So just think about this as one of those things. I think we already have a plan about how we approach our kids with online safety. We just are afraid to employ it when it comes to sex. So let's think about violence, right? I already had a like pre-planned approach when it comes to violence and or predators, no chatting. And this is why. When it comes to violence, it's like, hey, like we don't watch that kind of stuff because it gets in our head that that's acceptable. And how does it make you feel like, oh, and having those kind of conversations about violence and it not being something that we encourage. And there's a way of thinking about why that is. So that's a hard conversation to explain something that is like, I don't know, in that situation, like maybe violence was the answer, but the fact that you sitting and watching it at the tender age of 7 is not okay. And this is why. Kind of apply that same feeling of like, I don't want to expose my child to this and I have to think of a way to talk about it that makes sense. Just insert sex, right? And yes, there will be a time when sex is appropriate and we can say that to our children. We can actually tell them when it's going to be appropriate. And we could do that by, again, that practical, like the legal thing, right? We got to protect ourselves in that way. And then the second thing, how do you feel? Your emotion. It should be something that you wouldn't have to hide and close your computer and do that kind of stuff because you're not old enough to, or it makes you feel uncomfortable or unclear. When it is time, these things will feel differently. And we can talk about it as we get closer to time. So we're inviting them to a conversation forever. But we're also sharing with them. So we're not shaming sex. We're just saying, not right now. The same thing I did with violence. There are times where violence might feel justified, and it may be the only way that you see to defend yourself. But let's kind of talk about that. Let's sort of process it out. We're not saying it is never okay, but we are putting it in the context that their brain can understand it, especially when you have no control of when and how they're going to be exposed to it. I worry that parents may go, it's so overwhelming. There's so much shit out there. There's no possible way. Like, I just hope and pray.
Right.
Do that too. But there's also a way that you can prepare your children for the myriad of feelings that may come if they see content online that is not appropriate for them. With my children, the younger they are, I talk about the feeling. If you see something online and it makes you feel uncomfortable or it confuses you, show me, tell me about it. Because there is stuff on there that's like crazy. And I'm using the animated words and stuff because you better not be on there looking at.
Right.
Yeah, it's like an open invitation to engage with you around it.
I'll help explain what it is. And then we can talk about the feelings. We don't have to put the shame on the sex.
No, and taking the shame out of that and taking the like telling them what to do creates such a safety that they can talk to you about these things. I think that's like a key part of it also is like creating this environment where you can openly talk about how you feel, what you saw, and you're not going to get like punished for it. You're going to get understanding. You're going to get more awareness and knowledge and even love and attention from your parent rather than, getting shut down and pushed away and no knowledge. That's not okay. Shame. That's really a key part of it. I love that.
We know what that produces. We know that when we attach shame and sex together, that we get violence.
Yeah.
So in people's in people's real life, and whether that is emotional violence, physical violence, sexual violence, we already have the science out on that. So let's try to redirect that shame as much as possible, replace it with, like you said, learning, knowledge. And in doing this, we also teach our children how to have intimacy outside of what is like advertised, right?
Yes.
How to actually attract the thing that's going to satiate your feelings versus the template that you see that's supposed to make you feel good. Because a lot of the sex that we are exposed to doesn't even make us feel good. It's just the norm, I guess, or what we expect. But if honestly, it's like, actually, I feel like I want something yummy. I don't want to, I want food. Actually, like, that's actually feels like a meaningful, great, something that would satiate how I feel right now. So we're even helping our children take things that they may be introduced to and process, what does that actually mean for me? And how can I find a way to satiate that feeling in a way that's appropriate and safe?
I'm wondering, like, so my oldest is right on the verge of puberty right now, and I like it because porn can be so extreme, and I don't want him to get the idea that this is what you should expect from sex, or this is how you should be treating whoever you're going to end up having sex with. And delineating between that, and then I guess this like leads into like, how do people in general ethically consume porn?
No, that's I think I can see the connection from parenting to also reparenting ourselves,
Right.
right?
Yes.
So I take pause with the term ethical porn. Just
Mm.
I do believe the term is fine. I just think that it's important for us to like kind of define what that means for us, right? Because ethics is really decided by the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that is culturally acceptable is not necessarily good,
Right.
right? But it's deemed as good for the culture and the society in which you live. That's how our ethics are created. I believe we have our own personal ethics as well,
Right.
right? So I do think it is important when we are selecting anything, products, what have you. Like, I can go to the store and I can see some shit that's like ethically sourced, right? That really doesn't necessarily mean anything to me unless it's being applied to my personal ethics.
Right.
Because I see stuff that says like vegan and gluten free, but it's still unhealthy,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that thing is. So health has to even be determined by you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that societal ethics help us create the law. Like, we can agree, if these are our society's ethics, that these laws support those ethics. So I do believe, as a sex worker and as a parent, as a therapist, as a human, I can get down with whatever the law is, because there's no part of my goal that ends me in jail or with those type of consequences. So I'm always like, parents, no matter where your ethics are around sex, mindful of the law.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when it comes, honestly, when it comes to children and sex and the law and parenting, the bar is too fucking low. So
Right.
you can at least, at the very minimum, respect the societal ethics that are baked into the law.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot guide children by exposing them to what would be an ethical way to access. It puts us in conflict with the law, right? And then also there's a million different reasons. Some of the ones that you said, like what our children may come across and think that this is normal, and all those type of things. So people do and have asked me, can I point my 17-year-old towards, and I'm like, while that child you may think is emotionally prepared and you're doing this from a teaching lens and what have you, it is in conflict with the society's determination for that being ethical behavior in alignment with the law. No. How can we share those ethical values that you have so that you do prepare your child? What is available in the conversation? What media can you bring in to help support that? Songs, music is perfect. Even for your 10-year-old, when I'm thinking about some of the shows that he may be enjoying on Disney or YouTube, most of them cross boundaries all the time.
Right.
Violent and sexual, physical touch. Sadly, they still cross those lines. So even when I'm watching That's So Raven or Sweet Life of Zach and Cody, I could watch that show with them, and like within the first 15 minutes, I'll be like, pause it. Whoa. What just happened there?
Right.
Oh, well, they're just playing. Okay, that's cool for the show. But what if some guy did that to you? How would you feel? Mortified. Oh my gosh, I know. We're having conversations about boundaries, how to respect someone using their media. Sadly, it's baked in because our societal ethics are not in alignment with our personal ethics, right? Fast forward, my daughter is like, I guess maybe 14. Well, she's 19 now, so she must have been around 14 at the time. That song WAP came out, Wet Ass Pussy. And listening to that song, I could certainly teach her about sexual health for women in a way that doesn't cause me to share explicit content. right?
Mm-hmm.
I can certainly have a conversation with her about when you are ready to have sex, this is how your partner should approach you and
Mm.
those type of things. Or I could use this fucking song that she's already singing
Yes.
on repeat that my Apple Family subscription is paying for, and just be like, what if this song is true for you? She's like,
Right.
ew, none of it. And I'm
Ew.
like, none of it, Mom. And I'm like, well, what do you think the women are doing that have DAP? And she's like, DAP. I'm like, dry ass. She's like,
Mm.
oh my gosh, why are you saying this? I'm just saying it because it's real, because, it is real. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
we have boob. I'll be quiet now. But again, I can just drop that seed and run away because I'm dropping seeds the whole time.
Right.
Everything
Yes.
is not on that one moment. It's fine. I could just use that little song, drop a seed. And then, when the song comes on later, she's like, I don't want to hear it, Mom. And I'm like, that's okay. You already heard it. Thoughts there. It's good. Seeds planted. It's growing. Because now when you hear the song, you're thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So I want to be clear. It would even be ill-advised for us to share what type of companies that our children should be pointing to. Or if they're looking at this, then, if you're going to look at it, at least look at this. Like, no. We can't encourage that, and we cannot facilitate that legally. And for many reasons, I wouldn't suggest it in any way. However, we can help our children make good decisions based on their personal value set, the
Mm-hmm.
ethics that we are instilling in them. I mean, we really are giving our kids some power to click X. I don't like that. It doesn't sit well with me. And if I am
Right.
going to go
Yes.
there, I know I am making a decision based on how this makes me feel.
Yeah.
I'll tell you also from the emotional aspect, with my daughter, teaching her, don't press that, you shouldn't be on that, don't look at that, what are you doing, looking at that. I had to do so much makeup work later on helping her trust herself to make good
Mm.
decisions for herself as
Oh,
a big
yeah.
adult.
Oh, yeah. I have that issue a little bit of like wanting to get in there and kind of like control. I mean, that was like compliance and control was kind of the way in the 80s.
Mm,
But I love you're essentially building in media literacy
Yes.
for your kids and using all of the media that they're consuming as a teaching tool. And media literacy does translate over to porn literacy.
Yes.
It's
completely.
not
Yes.
like a direct line, but it at least lays the foundation in the same way that like boundaries and consent, like you don't have to give a hug to your weird uncle if you don't want
Mm-hmm.
to,
Right.
starts laying the foundation
Mm-hmm.
for consent in the bedroom later on. So it's brilliant.
Yes.
Thank you. It also helps them identify it, right? Because I don't want to bring
Mm-hmm.
my kid to the nightclub to see that men will push up on you, and then you got to be like, no, don't touch me like that. And then you got to go get the help from another man to help you. Like, I don't
Yeah.
fucking want that. And I can't. Because again, like legally, right, I can't bring the kids into these environments or expose them to environments to help train them. So I can use what is allowed. Hell, I could watch Minecraft with my son to
Mm-hmm.
be like, I'm sorry. I thought that we were playing, what is it called, fantasy mode, and you're hitting me. I did
Mm-hmm.
not consent to that. And he'll say to me, it's just a video game. I'm like, but
Mm-hmm.
my character, when I play, as we know, I get into role play and everything. When I'm
Mm-hmm.
playing, I can feel that character getting hurt. Don't
Mm-hmm.
do that to me. So we're modeling so that when our children are faced with some of these more serious situations where we won't be there for, because no one
Right.
is going to approach our children in this particular way when we're there, and when they make their own decisions, they're not going to do that with us there. We do have to work on blocking things that our children shouldn't see, but we also have to factor in, are you in control of introducing your child in an age appropriate and safe way, the things that they need to know to make good decisions for their body and other people's.
No, and controlling your children doesn't work because you're not always there. So you want, like, when they do go out to the club for the first time, to be able to handle that and know themselves enough and know their own boundaries to be able to speak for themselves.
Yeah, and be resourced and have some
Mm-hmm.
practice in, establishing boundaries, communication skills, all those kinds of things. Oh, it's so great. I could talk to you about parenting forever, but I have to get your take on the porn industry as well, because, I do think that there is a lot of this language around quote unquote ethical porn that floats
Mhm.
around. And that's kind of like the advice of like, make sure you find ethical porn. And people are like, oh, what does that mean? I'm curious about there's been such a sea change in the industry with all of the online platforms and actually being able, like a lot of creators being able to create their own content. I just saw that the new OnlyFans CEO just did a really big I can't remember which publication. So there was some language in there that made me hopeful of like valuing the content creators. I'm like, oh, are we heading in the right direction finally? Maybe. I'm sure largely actually because of some of the work that you do. Where do you think the industry is at right now? Are the online platforms creating more opportunities for agency, bodily autonomy, those sorts of things? Or is porn still largely oriented towards white, cis, het, male fantasy?
Ooh, I don't think that you can love your work unless you're critical.
Mm.
Yeah.
Because if you want it to grow, if you want it to be the best or better, then you are in constant assessment, evaluation, and tweaking of it. We can make tweaks as consumers and also as performers and everything in between: cast, crew, people who talk about sex, people who sell sex, from the product to the consumer and everything in between. That it is my job to sort of like hold your feet to the fire to make sure we're doing this right, because I love my work and I want to be proud of it. So I looked up a couple of the platforms, companies that I have come in and done consent workshops, and what does a safer, not safe, safer set look like,
Mhm.
and how we can create protocol and standards. Then honestly, it's a very big surprise to me. Look up that company to see it fall under a parent company that is
Mm.
consistently exploiting sex workers, that is
Ugh.
consistently bending to credit card companies and advertisers, and it's like where the money is lining the enemy and the ally. It's
Ugh.
like very, very frustrating. To that end, I think one of the things that the major companies have learned, that we've seen with, like, I don't know, cereal companies, is that people will follow the brand. At some point, unfortunately, people don't care who owns it and who's getting paid and who's eating off of it, as long as it delivers that whatever that product is. So what they've done is sort of fractionated themselves into, like, something that says, oh, I don't want to say any, I don't know, I'll just use your names, like Sarah and Robin intimacyforever.com, right? Like they'll
Mhm.
and like, oh my God, like two queer women intimacy.com. And then it's owned by like a mega tube site that says like, fuck Sarah and Robin every day, all day when you see them in person, right?
Right.
And you're like, I love Sarah and Robin and I don't know how to give the money to them. And so that, so
Yeah.
that's kind of what's happening right now. King and I have a show called Porn and Politics. When we're not so politically burned out, we have time to have conversations about it. But right now we see all of these policies that are taking place in across our country are having a direct impact on our sexual expression, orientation, sexual health, and wellness. And if our industry's main product is intimacy,
Mhm.
sex, sexual orientation, identity, sexual behavior, sexual education, everything seeped in sex is not being affected, is to be tone deaf, right? And
Mhm.
people say like, oh, the sex industry will survive. It will. At what cost?
Right.
Mm.
At what cost? Restrictions have been placed on us. So there's certain things that we cannot do. We cannot discuss certain words we cannot use, because we're now being regulated by credit card companies who are being
Mm.
politically pushed by some of folks that are not in concert with sexual liberation.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So there's that fight, and policies are having not only professional implications, so that reduces how I can sell that particular content. Because on social media, we've also gotten deplatformed. So we're seeing that
Yep.
too. As we see this increase in these handmaiden tale policies, please understand that a whole profession of people are feeling the impact, and we'll feel it first, and then it's only going to continue to creep. So I was on Facebook, my personal Facebook, and there is a video of a woman taking out both of her breasts and pretending to breastfeed one of those really, really lifelike looking dolls.
Yeah.
What this woman was doing is doing a workaround, because breastfeeding is allowed on the Meta platforms, but you have to be actively breastfeeding. You can't just be talking about said milk. There must be this direct correlation to baby and milk, and therefore it's educational and or acceptable. This woman is pretending to breastfeed this child to advertise for her OnlyFans. My brain is like, what the, like, thankfully, baby is not real. You know what I mean? Like,
it twists everything into this weird, it gets worse. It's like by shaming and trying to get rid of it, it gets worse. It's like, it reminds me on a lesser level, like how we have to use code words on TikTok and stuff like that, schmegs, and like, you know, all of this like P's and V's and stuff, when it's just like, can we just, it's so bizarre.
And what's interesting about something you were sharing about ethics, and ethics being, you know, cultural, societal ethics, and then you've got to figure out where your personal ethics are and where can you find the intersection, right? It's like the ethics now, the cultural ethics that are determining what we can consume are actually coming down from corporations.
Yeah.
They're not coming from people.
Yeah.
I've lost contact with 86,000 customers because a platform has decided that this term, you can no longer target your audience. Instead, you rather deplatform me, have me come back and target everybody, like this person was doing, where it's just like, oh wait, no, you're going to get mommy bloggers, you're going to get you're going to get somebody opening this with their children in hand. You're going to get people that are really looking for information about breastfeeding, and now they think that it has to be glamorous and pretty like this. You know?
Yeah, if it's only funneled into one thing when it's not just one thing, then it becomes so twisted and distorted. It's like now you're taking the thing that's wholesome, quote unquote, and involving it with this sexual thing that isn't appropriate for everybody. It's like, keep it in its space where it should be. It's like, let's deal with the truth rather than what you just wish you could wash this thing away, you know? Yeah.
And just a final thought. There's lots of states of the industry, but an additional thought is, one of the things I'd like to pay attention to. Maybe we'll come back and visit this interview when we see sort of when we see the fruit of the labor of some of these folks that are trying really hard to incorporate sexual oppression, even more so, I'll say that, in our culture. We're seeing in schools here in Florida, they just got rid of the diversity and equity inclusion at the University of South Florida, getting rid of anything that appears in the word is woke, right? Like this is unnecessary. So porn is a microcosm of the larger society, and it's unregulated, supposedly unregulated industry. So you're going to always see things sort of bubble in that industry first and hardcore, because there are no protections for the people in that space like there are in other places. But when we start seeing like, oh, they're taking out diversity and inclusion in a school system, so representation and how many Black folks or just people of color are going to be enrolled, and what sort of like what standards does this university have to people that are marginalized, and that includes queer folks and all kinds of people. When we start seeing that happen and it being okay in the school system, I already know that my Black ass is not going to be getting hired quite at the same rate as ever before, when diversity and inclusion were a meaningful part of our society's ethics. So as we're starting to see a delineation of ethics in particular areas in our regular schmegular world, just know that it's happening at an accelerated rate with no regulation and or care within our industry. And so like, I'm like remembering for a little portion of time, performers of color were able to get certain words removed, or were able to get on maybe some of the front pages, if that, or like a respectable title on some of these companies' websites. That tide is changing, that in this place where people have the most access to people that are different than them, have the most private moments, have the most access to content that influences their behaviors in intimate moments with other people, the way that people think about themselves outside of their clothes, where they think about their sexual identity, that is going to become more like the University of Florida. White.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in porn too, like isolating certain types of people and play into this bucket of fetish and fetishization reinforces implicit bias, white supremacy, all of these things that people were we're sort of being forced to start to look at.
Yeah.
And then when you put it back in its quote unquote place, then you're giving people permission for hate and violence and all of those things that we've like just started to look at in our country.
It solidifies that otherness.
Absolutely. And I do think, hate never wins. They always suffer. They, and so you can sort of see, like, if y'all keep shooting yourselves in the foot by wanting to hang on to homophobic tropes, ageist tropes, racist tropes, all of that shit, like, it has to crumble at some point. And we have to help it crumble. And we do by having these conversations. Like, you don't have to care about my black ass, but just care, like, your sexy time is going to be impacted. Your sexy time is going to be impacted. Do something about it.
Yeah. It's a collective mindset. I think that's powerful. Yeah.
It is.
So for folks who do want to find your work, where can they do this? What are the platforms that you're on? Where are you creating your content? If someone wants to work with you as a client,
if you're looking for sort of like the comprehensive picture of Just Setting Jasmine, justsettingjasmine.com. If you just want the freaky nasty shit, that's cool too, royalfetishxxx.com. I am on every sex platform that you can think of, because that is the only way, is to diversify ourselves as much as possible to be where the people are. So whatever platform you are, you just search Just Setting Jasmine and buy me there. And if there's a platform that you're like, I just don't see you on my favorite platform, please reach out to me so we can work together to get me on there.
Oh, thank you so much. I feel like this is part one of this conversation, and we have to have you back next season to get a little bit more into some of the specifics, because I love what you're doing in all of the mediums that you work in. And I think that so much is evolving in porn constantly, that it's like, had we had this conversation a year ago, it would have been completely different, right?
It's a real barometer for where we're at. So thank you so much for this. It's been really wonderful.
You're so welcome. Thank you. Thanks for creating a platform for these conversations, and just for being so awesome.
So, Robin, I think we need to have Jasmine back on to really dive into, decolonization of porn and fantasy. And I mean, she like lightly touched on role play. Like, I feel like there are so many topics that we could get into with her. And because there was so much to talk about, like, I was really, really interested in her approach to talking about kids. And I'm glad we spent some time on that, because I found it very affirming that, some of the conversations that I've already started to have with Ruby around when you're online and anything is making you feel uncomfortable, or brings up a question for you, come and talk to me. Like, those are absolutely the conversations that we're having right now. But I really thought that her approach to treating sex, porn as an evolving conversation that you're going to be having forever was really helpful. And I think spot on.
Yeah, and engaging with the media that my kids are consuming. And it's kind of like the thing of like, you don't have to have all of the media be perfect. And hardly any of it is going to like have the perspective that you want to impart on your child. but you can be able to converse with them so they can, like you were saying, be media literate and be able to make their own choices. And really what Jasmine got into was how that then gives them the tools to do that on their own when we're not there, when, and gives them the space that they know they can come to us without shame when they're confronted with something that they don't feel great about or don't know how to digest.
It's sort of the same approach, right? When you do group watching with friends. I remember when we were both into Walking Dead, like there was a group of us at work who really liked Walking Dead. The conversations that came up around that at lunch were so interesting about ethics and morality and just all the questions that that piece of media brought
And
up for
who would
us at
do
the
the best
time.
and who we'd have on our team and who would be taking on which jobs. It becomes creative in a way to interact and have fun together.
Yeah, and using media as a tool for imparting your personal ethics without being heavy-handed or kind of
Right.
paternalistic about it. Like, I think that that was such an amazing invitation for, like, parenting
Yeah.
across the spectrum about anything and everything is, like, sit down with your kids, the things that they're interested in, and then just engage in conversation with them. And one of the things that she brought up that I was like, oh, I've been missing this side of the coin. She was talking about like, oh, how does that make you feel? And like, the juicy feeling, where is it? I realize like I use that with Ruby, but mostly when there are big feelings that feel kind of like out of their control. I'm like, okay, let's like try to find it in your body. Where is it? What does it feel like? But I don't usually do that around the
Yeah.
juicy stuff. And I love that, like, when you're engaging with stuff that they're really into, you're not just using it as a teaching moment, but also as like oh, let's call out the cool stuff. Then it just gets in, these conversations get integrated and it builds trust so that you can be having all of the gamut of conversations across their life.
Right. The trust and the safety.
That then just made me think of like what she was saying about like, bringing her full personhood to everything and the iconic, like really owning being an icon. Like, fuck yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love the boldness of it. And I love it's so empowering to just see someone so self-actualized, so in their power, and so just aware and unabashed about it. She is iconic. And
Very.
it's iconic to recognize that in yourself.
Mhm.
And it's something that I've
Mhm.
been feeling lately as I'm leaning into authenticity. Like, I'm going to be performing at a drag brunch at Precinct on March 23rd. The way I'm approaching this performance has been really about like, what do I just want to do?
Yeah.
It makes me feel more of that like icon feeling of like, I can stand up on a stage feeling powerful in my own self-expression, standing in it and owning it. I don't know how to explain it, but she's hitting it on the head.
That is, I think, when art really resonates, right? Is when someone is really expressing what they're channeling.
Yeah.
The thing that was interesting when Jasmine was talking about it is like I'm realizing that there is, for me, a lot of fracturing that I've been feeling lately in terms of my like access to my power. Like I can look back on stages where I was in an iconic era,
Yeah.
but I don't feel iconic. I don't think it's something that's enduring for me. And I think that that's actually something that I've got to start working on right now is like, how do I get back? Like, I need to take the baby steps. Like, I don't think I'm going to, like, be claiming icon status anytime soon. But I think that I could get to a place where I'm like, I'm in a real iconic era right now. Like, all right time, right place, things are falling into place. I'm feeling super empowered and like bringing together all the parts of myself to kind of get to that moment. And maybe that moment persists and leads to feeling more iconic in general. And I think that that's what's really amazing about Jasmine and her work is she's just stayed really fucking true to herself. Yeah. And like, yeah, she has enduring iconic status.
Yeah. Damn. I mean, seriously, look up Setting Jasmine if you haven't. I mean, her and King Noir, just those names alone, so well chosen, so iconic, and the beauty that they're creating is fantastic.
Yeah. Whether you are interested in, you know, some really hot porn or education or just more resources, like, you know, please go find Jet Setting Jasmine.
Yeah.
Because they're doing all the things. It's so good.
Yeah. Incredible person.
Yeah. Yeah. Find us, please, on Instagram and TikTok at FuckYeahPod. You can go to our website and join our email list, fuckyeahpod.com. It would be great if you would rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. It helps other people to find us.
Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Fuck Yeah Podcast is hosted and produced by Robin Jennings and Sarah Tomcheson, aka my mom. Theme music is by She Her Sir. Segments are voiced by Kristen Smith Davis. If you're enjoying the pod, please subscribe and leave us a rating or review. And don't forget to share with a friend. You can email us at fyapod@gmail.com or follow us on TikTok or Instagram at FuckYeahPod. Thanks for tuning in.